Hi everyone. So I have this challenging task of keeping a audience up soon after a heavy lunch, but I think I'm up for it. So let's begin. Um so my name is Shailesh Albuquerque, a very interesting name. I have about 20 years of experience. So right now I'm a principal architect at Google Cloud. But my experience kind of spans across multiple dimensions. The first 10 years of my life I spent building data centers. Then the next 10 years I was part of another hyperscaler, helping enterprises and startups start their journey on the cloud. And I took a 3-year kind of hiatus to build my own startup. So I've been a tech and a co-founder of my own startup. And now I'm with Google Cloud, continuing this journey where I'm partnering with some of our strategic customers on their journey to the cloud, right? So I'll try and bring up perspectives from both worlds because I've seen kind of, both worlds, the data center world and also the cloud world. So let's begin. So the topic really is about how can cloud be a strategic enabler or can give you the advantage in today's digital world, right? So a typical scenario that plays on my mind, and I'm sure some of you have experienced it, and every time I open the browser and maybe go to Google and it's nothing to do with, because I'm employed by Google, this used to be the experience even when I was prior to Google and before that. And if I see that spinning wheel, right, what's the first reaction that I would think? My thought process would think that, is my network up or down, right? And then I would think, okay, maybe, and if everything checks out, then, okay, maybe Google is down, right? But if I were to go to my banking site, and I've had this experience several times, and if I see that spinning wheel, my first reaction would be, maybe that site is down. My bank doesn't have the right infrastructure to keep it running, right? And then I would go into this mode of, okay, no, it looks like that's up, and maybe my network is down. What am I trying to say here? What I'm trying to say is that our perception of a business is governed hugely by how available it is, how resilient it is. And this is the new world, right? And this is what we are seeing with digital native businesses. And it's not just Google. If you see the most popular apps that you're using on your mobile or on the web are the ones which are giving a phenomenal experience. And that's how you build trust. The trust of the product that you're experiencing. Maybe it's your banking services, like maybe the loan or the fixed deposit interest comes later. The experience comes first, right? This is the new world we are living in. And obviously, a lot of it is governed by the way you create and craft digital experiences, the way you provide availability, the way you personalize and understand your customer. And that's really the basis for what I'm talking today, is about being able to give a competitive advantage to your business and using cloud as the basis for that, right? And it's not just cloud. I know this is a mixed audience, and using your, the data centers as well as cloud to be an audience for that. How many of you here, and I should have begun before I started, use cloud in some meaningful way in your organizations? Show of hands. Yeah, it's a significant number, right? But also I know there is a respectable audience that is also using data centers and continue to gain benefit out of that. And yeah, that's also valid in the new world, right? So I'll take a step back and talk about traditionally what IT has focused on as providing a service to your stakeholders or to your business, right? IT used to be, in some ways, catering to the demand that is the businesses putting on it, right? And businesses, if you look at retail businesses or manufacturing or any other business, it's really on the physical infrastructure, the stuff that is built, created, and this is fairly planned and slow. For example, for a retail organization, it's the departmental stores they set up, or the warehouses. For a factory, it's manufacturing. And for any other organization, like a services company, it's about how many employees they bring in and setting up the whole infrastructure for their employees. So it can be fairly well planned, and it's slow. So the characteristics of these businesses typically are The change in business context is a little slower, gradual, I would say, and then it's usually tends to be an annual IT planning cycle, right? But now the context has changed rapidly. Some of you are already experiencing it, and organizations that are on the frontier of digital are seeing it much more. And this is not just relevant for traditional businesses, it's relevant for everybody today. So what's happening? So you have the slower planned infrastructure or scale out that is happening, and typically this could be provided by the infrastructure that can be planned and capitalized over time. But then you have new avenues. You have digital and direct-to-consumer channels that you need to open up. And we are seeing this in every industry. A car manufacturer or a CPG, or a company that manufactures products, everyone needs to open a digital channel, right? And here the demands are very different. Just-in-time delivery, which means that deliveries and the path to get stuff to your customers is being backloaded or towards the very end, which means significant peaks and valleys, right? New products being built. And similarly, in the manufacturing world, there is this whole confluence of IoT and giving a digital experience to your consumers, maybe to experience their big machines, right? Be it their washing machine or their refrigerators and so on and so forth. And finally, we have this world of engaging your prospective customers, which is really through digital channels, right? And that's through social media or sales and marketing. So you see the context of a business has really kind of exploded into this two worlds, right? The slow-moving world and this extremely fast-moving world, right? So really, every business today is a 24/7 business. And this notion of taking a downtime on the weekend or having a maintenance window, it's going away. Even if you see banks, which were typically going to have maintenance, have to support payments and UPI on a 24/7 cycle, right? So that's where the businesses are. So the change in business is continuous. The context is continuous. IT has to keep rapidly delivering, not on a slow cycle, but on a scale and with peaks and valleys, and plan like very short stints. So I'll illustrate this as an example of what I'm saying. So Mahindra is as traditional as you can get, right? And they make great cars. And manufacturing or designing and planning for releasing a car, it takes its own time, right? So that's really the cycle that can be planned in terms of capacity, in terms of infrastructure. But with the XUV 700 launch, and it's a fantastic vehicle and blockbuster, the challenge was to get to an audience which was really youthful and a particular audience. And that was predominantly done through YouTube, right? So Mahindra could get to 95% of their target audience to engage with their brand in a matter of 24 hours through a digital channel, right? When it comes to Scorpio, when Scorpio was launched, they had released it for bookings, and within the first minute, there were 30,000 bookings. And within the first hour, there's about 3 lakh. So all the work, back-end work that was done to design and build, and obviously that's all of that effort culminated in a value realization. It took 1 hour, and within a day, it was about $2.3 billion of value realized within that instant. So you can imagine the cycle that a typical planning cycle takes, but the value realization happens in a very short span of time, right? So this is, how was this possible? And in this case, Mahindra used the Google Cloud assets, both in terms of integrating with YouTube, as well as for the Scorpio launch, the booking site. And what I'm trying to tell you here is that this is the differentiation, or this is where you can get a strategic advantage, right, by using cloud, right? So that's the first theme that I wanted to talk to you about. The second theme is that often cloud is made to, you start thinking about cloud through a construct of cost, right? And often we see arguments around cost that comes in. But cloud is no longer about cost of IT, because, as I mentioned, the situation and the context has changed rapidly, right? It's about catering to new business. So I'm making a little bit of a controversial statement, but for a fixed cost of infrastructure, if you really know your infrastructure and that it's going to be remain fixed for, let's say, 1 or 2 or 3 years, cloud could probably be more expensive than your own infrastructure, right? But the question that every business is asking today is your infrastructure really fixed? Can it support the demands of what the consumers are asking or your channels, your digital channels are asking, right? And often the answer is no. Infrastructure cannot really be fixed. So what are the other constraints, or what are the other things that are coming into play? It's about agility, being able to react to your business demand. It's about being able to market your product extremely quickly and ahead of competition, right? And the third part is about resiliency, being available 24/7. And this is often the cause, and especially when we look at e-commerce, right? The audience today is very, very, I would say, they're ready to move from one side to another in a fraction of a second, right? There is hardly any patience to wait for a product to be available or to come back if a site is down. So resiliency, and this resiliency across multiple data centers, and in often cases across multiple regions, that is driving the need to go to cloud, not just about the infrastructure part of it. Obviously, then there is this need to go global, and we are seeing a lot of businesses in India who are actually going and having a footprint across the world, right? And cloud kind of helps them get to that very, very quickly without having to really land any infrastructure or data centers. And then I would argue that the price argument comes really towards the end of all of it. It is important, it cannot be ignored, but the parameters that drive competitive advantage are all the ones you see before cost, right? So how do digital businesses then realize this value? What really happens, and how does cloud become the catalyst for that? So my argument is digital businesses are really experimentation engines. All they're doing is they're trying to experiment, and when I say experiment, what are these experiments? It's you come up with an idea, you prototype it, validate it, build, deploy, and try and get customer value. Often, these experiments will result in failures. But that's really important, because if you expand the number of experiments that are done, you will find those killer or those star use cases or ideas that will create extremely large value for your business, right? So this is today not possible to a large extent with fixed infrastructure. So fixed infrastructure plays a whole role in delivering a business which is planned and has a certain motion to it. But when it comes to experimentation, I think it's fair to say that cloud is the one where today most customers are experimenting, because you don't know if that experiment is going to scale or whether you have to scale down, right? And that's why startups are gravitating towards cloud to begin with, but you cannot really let startups only experiment. If you are in a traditional business, you also have to be in that mode. And that's the competitive advantage that cloud provides. So my argument is digital natives, the ones that are, we call them startups, and as they scale, they become a more digitally native organization using concepts of cloud or data analytics and machine learning. They're running hundreds of such experiments in parallel. And if you see the amount of products sometimes are launched and then pulled back and re-released in a different fashion, in a different avatar, that's where their secret sauce lies. And every company has to be able to run these experiments in some meaningful fashion to keep up. So the other aspect I mentioned about is decision making, right? And you have to be constantly making decisions to support your business. This is where AI plays a role, right? And to simplify it, AI is, if you bring it down to a very nascent or a unit level, it's like when you go to if you go to a retail store, there's a very smart clerk or an agent who looks at you, who understands what you're wearing and understands maybe what watch you're wearing and your age and your demography and who you are with and recommends the right products, right? And you find that, okay, this store where I go to is very personalized and they're taking care of me. They're giving me a very good experience. But how do you scale it to thousands and millions and sometimes billions of experiences across all your digital networks? That is where AI plays a role. All you're doing is you are learning from patterns, and once you decipher a pattern and you create that becomes the model, and from that model, now you're able to predict or recommend for somebody who we've never seen before, right? And that's precisely what's happening. So what's happening is as your surfaces increase, when I say surfaces, you're engaging audiences on your website, on your app, on your mobile, and even sometimes getting physical data, you have a large explosion in the amount of engagements that you're doing, and that results in a lot of data, right? And now to make sense of this data and to be able to recommend, be able to personalize your decisions for one user who's landed on your website, it takes the power of artificial intelligence or machine learning, as we call it, right? So this is really what AI is doing today. And this is where also you have to build a competitive advantage because the digital natives are doing that. And if for a traditional business, you have to give better experiences, this is the way to go, right? And then we have another huge, I would say, uplift with Gen AI and the large language models coming in. And how is it possible today, or how do you structure an experience that where you could use your cloud, is what I can show you here. For example, these are your engagement channels. Your users are coming in on your left, chatbots maybe, or they are experiencing your API. So you have a contextual content data that's coming in, right? Also data, if you see on the top, that's really data that resides within your data centers, within your on-premise. And the third aspect is the large language models. And I'm talking this in context of large language models and Gen AI, right? So, and this is a reference stack that is possible on Google Cloud today. Your large language models, that's called PaLM in our world. Google PaLM is the large language model that's currently available. This takes months of training and a lot of infrastructure, but once the model is available, you could actually adapt it and import it into your own layer within your own context and tenancy of Google Cloud using a service called Vertex AI. And then you can craft all these experiences, be it through dialogue, through chat, when you're having your customer experience, or you're providing summarization of data that has been collected for your customers, or many other channels, right? So this is what we are seeing today. And this is now powering the next set of experiments that digital natives are definitely doing. And it's also possible for traditional enterprises to continue doing that using a combination of existing infrastructure, and that could be within your own data centers, but you augmenting it using cloud. And these sort of architectures and capabilities today, I would argue, are only possible in the cloud. It's very hard to bring large language models into your own data centers and do what is required to train it or fine-tune it, because it needs enormous amount of infrastructure as well as particular set of infrastructure capabilities like GPUs and fast networks, right? So this is really coming back to the theme of how digital natives are experimenting, but every other organization can use to experiment, get to the ideas, try them out, find the ideas that work, double down on it, and provide that experience back to the customer. So I'm going to wrap up because I've run out of my allotted time, and I'll keep some questions, maybe some time for Q&A. today's digital business strategy is like the Red Queen effect, right? I don't know if you know about Alice in Wonderland. So with Alice and the Red Queen, uh, it felt like they were running, but in the same spot. And that's really what's happening. Change is constant, and today's enterprises have to keep running just to remain where they are, just to remain competitive, to remain in business, right? And that's what you may be experiencing also from the demands that the business is putting on you. And if you have to run faster and get a competitive advantage or be better than the rest, then you have to really run faster, and that's where the experimentation, trying different things, and that's where cloud becomes an enabler or a catalyst, right? So I hope this was informative, and that's where I kind of wrap up today's session. But I don't know if we have time for Q&A, but I'm happy for any questions, or we could lead to the next session. You can find me on yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, or we can connect afterwards in the corridor. Yeah.
I have a question. In a large manufacturing concern, which is having an ERP solution in place, how do you calculate the ROI between cloud technology and on-premise technology?
Yeah, so the answer is it depends. And depends on ERP. It's like a very, it can get to many things depending on what you want to do. So there's a standard ERP which has a certain footprint when it comes to server, storage, compute, and there is a way to compare, right, over a timeline, maybe 2-3 months, how much of compute, I'm sorry, not 2-3 months, that'll be ridiculous, over a period of 3 years or 4 years, how much of compute, storage, network capacity is being used. So that's one traditional way, and we believe that today you could actually do it much more effectively on the cloud. The reason being that although you have one production ERP, you'll have several environments which are staging and development and this large landscape of infrastructure. And cloud gives you the ability to stop and start what you don't need, right? Any which way, that's one way. But today we are seeing ERP is not just ERP. There are so many hooks. One is to your front-end systems and your customer-facing systems. The other is your data and analytics. Some of this data today is done in a traditional way where the ERP provider will give you a module to actually process that data. But a lot of customers are also using tools like big data, like Spark, or data warehouse. And that's when you do the entire analysis of that, and when you do the cost estimate, is where, and ultimately the cost would result in you understanding what's the storage and network and infrastructure footprint, and that's how you would typically do the comparison.
Security is also a concern, isn't it?
Absolutely. Security is the number one thing, and there wouldn't be like cloud without cloud providers having to build top-notch security, right? And this security often, you will notice, surpasses what can be provided on a data center. Just for the very simple fact, right? For example, most cloud providers today, and Google certainly, every time you put data, it's all encrypted, right? You can have your own keys. You can manage your own keys. This is very hard to do in a data center. And I know because I've built data centers in the past, managing keys and encrypting all the data is really, really hard. But cloud providers provide easy ways of doing it. The very reason is that we could do it at scale. We could do it at scale, and we could have technologies that are invented within our own organizations. And Google has been a pioneer of that. Second is the controls that are offered in terms of security and configuration, firewall, web application firewalls, denial of service protection. This becomes more and more apparent when you start having a internet-facing or a consumer-facing app, because that's where most of the threat comes in. And most often you'll find that cloud providers are, and Google certainly can absorb a lot of demand or the denial of service. We are in a position to handle a lot of that network throughput and protect the customers who are using our infrastructure. So I would say security is number one and absolutely something everyone should be thinking about. But what we are finding is a lot of the customers we are working with, banks, for example, or healthcare providers, they are finding that building security on the cloud is fairly easier actually when compared to doing it on their data centers. And I can give more examples if we have a chance to talk again. All right, I think that
Thank
kind
you.
of, there is one more gentleman. I think I'll let, if there is time. Okay.
First of all, thanks for keeping us awake after lunch.
Oh, thank you. That's the best compliment I've received today.
So I have a more sidetrack question. Where you speak about large language models,
Yeah.
generative AI, and
Yeah.
Google itself, as well as other cloud providers, playing that role in managing. But when it comes to the more popular notions about quantum computing and blockchain, where does Google itself is placed? Because here we are talking about a high compute, intense compute coming out of blockchains, coming out of quantum computing. So how are you well placed in terms of managing that data, that compute from your own data centers and your own services?
Well, I'm not qualified to talk a lot about how we manage our own internal data centers. I predominantly represent the customer-facing arm. Having said that, when it comes to quantum computing, Google has significant capability and investments, and you see Google often coming up with what's the latest update on quantum computing. So that's a whole wave of experimentation that is happening within Google. So far, at this stage, I don't think there is anything that is ready for consumers to experience, unlike what we are seeing with the large language models, right? The large language models, already the capability is available. Today, Bard is what all of you can experience, and that is Google's large language model powering Bard behind the scenes. And this is experienced through like web, mobile, or if you're using workspaces, that's how it is experienced. On blockchain, it's so Google is an infrastructure provider. A lot of Web3 companies use Google behind the scenes. Blockchain, and to qualify what the gentleman said, it needs a lot of compute to validate or to run the hashes and validate the signatures and so on and so forth. So a lot of our customers use us as one of the infrastructure layers underneath, and because it's easy to scale up and scale down, that's where Google provides infrastructure. So we have significant partners and customers using, Coinbase being one of the largest, who announced a big partnership with Google last year, and that's where Google wants to help startups, or any, for that matter, not just blockchain, any startup today. Today, we're seeing a lot of startups emerging in the Gen AI space, right? And even they need access to, the ones who are actually building the models, the large language models, they need access to a huge amount of compute and be able to run these models for a long duration. So we are focused on building the right set of capabilities at the network level, at the infrastructure level, having the right compute, which is GPUs, available to them, and make it easy for them to scale up and scale down. So that's where we are focused on. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right. I hope. Yeah, thank you.